Good evening. Here we are again on our Tuesday Bible study from Discord server. And tonight we're going to be obviously doing the Bible and science. I will try to remember once again to put the link in the chat. This is being multicast on YouTube, DLive, and Twitch. And what I usually do, in case you're new to listening, is I'll go over a section on whatever material I'm looking at and then stop and ask for comments, and then we'll go on. So tonight I'm going to start mostly with the science end of things because we have to know what's being compared. So we'll do that. And the question is, who is the real God of the Bible? It seems that a lot of Christians think that science is, because whether it's Genesis or, with Creation Week, the days of creation, shape of the earth, any of those things, many Christians automatically bow the Bible to what is believed to be science. And that's problematic on a couple of levels, but first we need to know what science is and isn't. And I'll mostly be talking about cosmology and evolution, and not so much empirical testable science except to define it. So we'll start with that. What empirical science is. True science is the pursuit of understanding our world, and I'm going to stop right there for a second and see if I can also share my screen for the people in Discord. I forgot I need to do that so they can see what I'm talking about, because I do a lot of screen sharing. So if you can, take a look at that, and hopefully nothing will crash. Okay, so empirical science is the pursuit of understanding our world, but when it comes to claiming something is a scientific fact, certain procedures are required called scientific method, and it starts with abduction, which is to observe a natural phenomenon. And as a reminder, a pet peeve of mine, phenomenon is the singular, phenomena is the plural. So you observe something in nature, and then you form a hypothesis about what could cause that observation, that thing to happen. So use a process of deduction. Start with an experiment to test your hypothesis. You have an independent variable, which is the cause, a dependent variable, which is the effect, and a control variable, which is the constant. And I found a good illustration of that. I'm going to hopefully make that page bigger instead of smaller. You never know what happens sometimes with these web pages. And it doesn't want to go where I want it to be on the page, but we'll try that. What they have here is the control variables. They're testing the growth of a plant, right? And on the left, on left and right, they have both the same starting control variables. They have some garden soil and a small plant and some dirt and water and temperature. Those are all equal. So those are the controls. And then a dependent variable is what is going to be the effect that we're predicting, the plant height. Okay, so the independent variable, then they're going to test light color. Does light color affect plant growth, all other things being equal? So what they're saying is that their test, they're going to see whether the yellow light or the red light makes the plant grow faster. And so what they're controlling is the light color. Their controls, the control variables is the starting point, and then they'll observe the height of the plant. So that's what those terms mean. And so we have these three variables, and then we're going to also test the null hypothesis, which is an attempt to falsify. That is to say, whenever you have a test to show an effect of a cause, you should also test in a way to try to break your theory. Do everything you can to falsify it. Then you analyze your results and repeat that. That's the scientific method. And you do this with naturally occurring phenomena like plant growth. Induction only deals in probabilities. So you would guess about something based upon what you think is most likely. That's not scientific method. So if something is not a naturally occurring phenomenon and cannot be tested by the scientific method, then no theory about it can be called scientific. And that's really the point I'm getting at with this. I'm sorry about my voice, it's a little raspy tonight. So, knowing what science is, we're going to look at what science isn't. Pseudoscience. A past event such as the Big Bang or abiogenesis, which is life from non-life, cannot meet the standard required to call itself a scientific theory, much less a fact, because no one observed it, it's not repeatable, and you can't control any of the variables, so how can it be a scientific theory? Such theories are mere philosophical assumptions and guesses. Investigating the past is in the realm of probability and is highly subjective. In fact, science prides itself on its instability, since what it theorizes today may be abandoned tomorrow by the scientific method. So pseudoscience is the only thing that really evolves. And since interpretation of data is according to the philosophical bias of the interpreters, we can expect that to be the case. They may change their minds. And by the way, since it's always changing, its defenders of the scientific method and things that are claimed to be science shouldn't get upset when people disagree with the current theory. Why is it that people get so bent out of shape about whether people believe that that the Earth is a spinning ball, or that life evolved from arose from non-life and then evolved? Why do people get upset about that, since science prides itself on always changing, depending on available data and the theory of the moment? So, any questions before we get into the issue of cosmology and whether it's a real science? Before I go on, anybody have a little comment to make about that? I think I've got it all unmuted. Anybody at all? And welcome also to people in YouTube and any of the other live streams. Okay, I'm not seeing any comments, so we'll go on to whether cosmology is a real science, because we're going to find out whether the Bible should bow to it. Merriam-Webster defines cosmology as 1a, a branch of metaphysics that deals with the nature of the universe, 1b, a theory or doctrine describing the natural order of the universe, and number 2, a branch of astronomy that deals with the origin, structure, and space-time relationships of the universe. Emphasis might also note that cosmogony, or cosmogony, depending on who you ask, deals only with the origin, so cosmology deals with all of it. Just to make that little clarification. But so for cosmology, we have metaphysics and doctrine and something called space-time. Okay? Do those fit the definition of science? Given those definitions that we had of empirical science, which is knowable, observable science, and pseudoscience, how should we classify it? Metaphysics is not physics. Doctrine is not observation. Relationships among entities in a hypothetical realm, space-time, is not observation of the natural realm. In fact, so-called space-time is conceptually impossible, as even Tesla said, since non-physical entities cannot be bent or considered a physical dimension, and if not physical, not scientific, because the scientific method is bound entirely by naturalism, which by definition must exclude the non-physical or supernatural. Since space-time is non-physical, then it can't even be a scientific theory. Any questions on cosmology and whether it's a science? Any comments about that? Okay. So, what are we making the Bible bow to? If we accept that the Bible is inspired by God, then it must follow that the Bible is not false and does not teach, rather than merely report, inaccuracies. That is to say, there are a lot of things the Bible reports that people said or did that isn't necessarily something that God told them to say or do or approved of. So we're going to take the cosmology presented in the Bible now, and we'll start with Genesis 1. I'm going to get rid of that other tab so I don't keep clicking on it, and make this a little bigger. As I read this, does this sound anything like standard cosmology or science, as far as the theory goes of the order of things? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the water. So the first thing we have is water. Okay? This, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, verse 1, is a title. And this whole chapter is an introductory summary, which was common in ancient Near East practice. So chapter 1 and chapter 2 are not competing or alternate creation accounts. They're simply the way ancient Near East histories were written. And this is written as historical narrative, not as an allegory or theological messaging per the Michael Heiser terminology, if you know who he was. An expert on Hebrew and ancient languages and things, but not so much of a theologian. Anyway, and God said, let there be light. So the second thing is light. We start with water. God made water, and then he said, let there be light. God saw that light was good. He separated light from darkness, called the light day, darkness night. And evening and morning, day 1. If you wanted to describe a normal, what we call a solar day, you couldn't have been any more specific than that. If people want to reinterpret it, they have to first find out whether the text is telling them this is some kind of allegory, which I don't see support for in the text itself. And then they would have to explain away evening and morning, day 1, evening and morning, day 2. To say that these are ages is to throw away that evening and morning and reinterpret it, and at that point, what's the point? Okay? And then God said, let there be a vault. We'll talk about that term. Between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. As it was so, God called the vault sky, and there was evening and the morning a second day. Now, if you look at the Hebrew and Greek words, the Hebrew word is rakia for this vault. The Greek word is stereoma. And both of them, in every context in which they're used in the Bible, denotes something very strong. It is compared to strong metals that would be hammered out. It's never described as simply a void or a space. It's something strong, strong enough to hold up the waters above. And God said, let the water under the sky be gathered into one place, and let dry ground appear. It happened. Ground was called land. Waters were called seas. God saw it was good. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it. This order already, if you're familiar with evolutionary theory, is not the same. Okay? So we have a problem already. Who bows to who in this scenario between the Bible and evolutionary theory? Land produced vegetation, plants bore seeds, trees bearing fruit with seed in according to their kinds. God saw it was good. So they did not evolve from something else, from pond scum or anything else. And evening and morning, the third day. Then let there be lights. Fourth day until there's lights in the sky. And notice that the lights are in the vault. You could say, using English translations, that the lights are in the sky, which, according to the way most people, look up at the sky and see the lights, is not a problem. But when you have a firmament, which is the Latin translation of either rakia or stereoma, firmamentum is where we get the word firm. It means strong and hard and able to hold something up. In that firm thing, in it, not above it, not underneath it, are the lights in the sky. And not only lights, but signs to mark sacred times and days and years. So it's a clock and a calendar. And let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, lesser light to govern the night, which is, that word govern, if you study it, is about the idea of being the first thing that happens. So they mark the beginning of the day or the beginning of the night. Now the moon, of course, varies in its time of rising, but it is the most prominent thing, is actually the most primary meaning, is it's the most prominent thing in the sky. Nobody would argue that the most prominent light in the sky during the day is the sun, and the most prominent light in the sky during the night is the moon. So prominent lights no question, it doesn't mean that the moon is always up to light the night sky. That's not what it means. So, and he also made the stars. What an afterthought. Now, I've been to the Creation Museum and seen their show about the vastness of the universe, which is standard cosmology, and they just kind of gloss over this almost afterthought about the stars. And their viewpoint is that it shows the greatness of God's power. God's power isn't in question, and he doesn't need to make, unimaginable distances to make a point about that. Everything, even the smallest, the tinier you go, the more impressive creation is, especially when it comes to biology. So I hardly think we need a vast universe in order to show the power of God. But the way Genesis reads is not like standard cosmology, even for young Earth creationists, because the stars are an afterthought. But they help mark the seasons. We have constellations. Some of them are mentioned, like the Pleiades in Job. So this is something that God designed as signs to mark seasons and to shed light. So God set those in the firmament to govern the day and night and to separate light from darkness, and that was the fourth day. Let water on the fifth day teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. It actually says in the Hebrew, along the face of it. Think of it as like the interior surface of a ball, a hollow ball. That would be the face of the sky, the face of the firmament. The ball being firm, but it has a hole in the middle where we are. And no, this is not hollow earth or concave earth. This is just saying where the sky is and why birds fly along the face of it. Not a perfect analogy, but there you go. So God created the great creatures of the sea. And notice something here. These things are created from the water, not from the ground. It just says, let the waters produce these things, which is interesting. According to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind, that's obviously along the face of the firmament. God blessed them and said, be fruitful, increase in number. And he made fish and birds separately, not one from the other. Fill the water in the seas, let birds increase on the earth. Evening, morning, and fifth day. And then God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, wild animals, each according to its kind. And so they didn't evolve from anything either. They came from the ground. God made the wild animals, livestock, creatures moving along the ground according to their kinds. Then, last of all, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky. So they may rule over. This doesn't mean abuse. It doesn't mean waste or pollute. It means to be responsible for. And over the livestock and wild animals, all the creatures that move along the ground. That's the purpose for which mankind was made. So this world is our habitat. It's designed for us. And God made the habitat before making the people to put in it. So God created mankind in his own image, and I will break this down a little bit more slightly in the debate on Friday, which I'll talk about more at the end if I remember. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. They are both made in the image of God. I've heard many people say that women are only made in the image of man. It doesn't say that in Genesis. It says they, male and female, are created in the image of God. So God blessed them and said to them, not him, be fruitful and increase in number. It's kind of hard to do if you only have a him anyway. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature on the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. Yes, people were designed originally to be fruitarians. It doesn't mean it was always going to be that way. And I have done a year or so ago a debate on whether it's okay to eat meat, whether eating meat is a sin. So I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, at this point, they were fruitarians. All the beasts of the earth and the birds in the sky, creatures on the ground, everything that has breath of life in it, which is an interesting phrase, the breath of life. I give every green plant for food. So everybody was either a fruitarian or a vegetarian, even the animals. This is not evolutionary theory with nature red in tooth and claw. That's not any sort of match. God saw all that he made was very good, and there was evening and morning the sixth day. So, needless to say, there's a lot of problems between Genesis and evolution. Just doesn't fit. Let's go now to Job 38, and welcome to more people on YouTube. So let me roll this back up. All right, fine. Sometimes I hit that middle button by accident. What I say, Job 38, I think I said 38. Some more creation stuff. God is grilling Job on his arrogance at demanding an audience for all the bad things that happened to him. Long story, not going to go through there right now. And God says, where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Earth has a foundation. Also, by the way, in Genesis, if the Bible were pushing standard cosmology, what was the earth orbiting in the first few days? Doesn't work. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment? Yes, there's poetic speech here, but how is it being described? As something spinning, moving, orbiting, hurling through space in a corkscrew pattern, as standard cosmology says? Absolutely not. Never described that way, poetically or otherwise. When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place, when I said, this far you may come and no farther, here's where your proud waves halt. When he separated in Genesis 1, out the dry land and the sea, that's what he's talking about there. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Does that sound like molten rocks flying around and slamming into each other? When you have a clay seal, it's generally flat and you press something into it. The seal, that you're sealing it with to identify you, press something into it. The earth takes shape like that. Its features stand out like those of a garment. The wicked are denied their light, and the raised arms is broken. That means somebody trying to rise up and do violence. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? How long was it until people found places like the Marianas Trench? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the deepest darkness? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. What is the way to the abode of light? Who needs Enoch for this stuff? And where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwellings? Surely you know, for you were already born. You have lived so many years. He's being sarcastic, obviously, toward Job and his arrogance there. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? There are prophecies with those things in it. What's the way to the place where lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain, and a path for the thunderstorm, to water a land where no one lives, an uninhabited desert, to satisfy a desolate wasteland and make it sprout with grass? Does rain have a father who fathers the drops of dew? From whose womb comes the ice? Who gives birth to the frost of the heavens, when the waters became hard as stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen? How much frozen seawater do you think people encountered in the northern hemisphere in Israel? Not a whole bunch, I'm guessing. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? I mentioned this a little bit ago, the constellations mentioned in the Bible. Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or lead out the bear with its cubs, Ursa Major, and Minor, I guess, I don't know, are the cubs? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Can you raise your voice to the clouds, cover yourself with a flood of water? Do you send lightning bolts on their way? And they do have channels. It's an electrical thing I won't get into, but who gives the ibis wisdom, or the rooster understanding? Who can count the clouds or tip over the water jars of the heavens when the dust becomes hard and the clouds of earth stick together? Do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in the thicket? Who provides food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wander for lack of food? It goes on. I'm not going to read more than that right now. There's also something about the slithering serpent when the sea dragon sort of thing. But And it's called Leviathan there, and there's also another place about Leviathan, and it's a pretty neat description. I think that's might be chapter 40. It's so interesting. Why did it do that? I clicked on the wrong thing. I want to go to the next chapter, and it's not letting me. Come on. Here we go. And he goes on to, I'll just skim through this part, about mountain goats and animals, and the wild ox, and the ostrich, and the horse, and hawks, and then we'll go on to Job 40, because I think that's where Leviathan and Behemoth are. Let's see, let me go down here a little bit. There we are, verse 15, chapter 40 of Job. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins, what power in the muscles of its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar. The footnotes in most translations are comical. They say, is this an elephant or a rhino or something? Tail like a cedar? I don't think so. The sinews of its thighs are close-knit. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like rods of iron. It ranks first among the works of God, yet its maker can approach it with its sword. The hills bring it their produce, and all the wild animals play nearby. Under the lotus plants it lies, so it's kind of a marsh animal. Wish that wouldn't pop up. Hidden among the reeds in the marsh, the lotuses conceal it, the poplars. Raging river does not alarm it. Can anyone capture it by the eyes, or trap it, or pierce its nose? This is a fearsome animal. Can you pull it with a fish hook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Put a cord through its nose, pierce its jaw with a hook. Will it beg you for mercy, speak to you with gentle words? Will it make an agreement with you to save its life? Can you pet it like a bird, or put a leash on it for the young women in your house? Can you trade for it? Can you even pierce its hide with harpoons or spears? If you lay a hand on it, you will remember the struggle and never do it again. This is not any animal we know, but it's something that God described to Job as an animal he knew, and saying, you want to see something impressive, check out the Leviathan. Okay? Goes on in here, no one is fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? That's what he's getting at in all this and saying to Job. And then going on and on about Leviathan. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coat of armor? Sounds to me like a dragon. Whoops. Who dares to open the doors of its mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields. Sounds like a stegosaurus. Tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between. They're joined fast to one another. They cling together and cannot be parted. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Fire-breathing dragon? Eyes like the rays of dawn. Flames stream from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke from its nostrils as a boiling pot. Its breath sets coals ablaze, and flames dart from its mouth. The folds of its flesh are tightly joined, firm and immovable, chest hard as rock. When it rises up, the mighty are terrified. The sword that reaches it has no effect, nor does the spear or the dart or the javelin. Iron it treats like straw, and bronze like rotten wood. Arrows do not make it flee. Sling stones are like shaft to it. A club seems to it but a piece of straw, and it laughs at the rattling of the lance. Its undersides are jagged potsherds. Again, typical any number of dinosaurs with jaggedy plates, leaving a trail in the mud like a threshing sledge. It makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron and stirs up the sea like a pot of ointment. This is a sea creature. And yet it comes on land and hangs around in the marshes. Leaves a glistening wake behind it. One would think the deep had white hair. Nothing on earth is its equal, a creature without fear. So, they say the dinosaurs are extinct, maybe or maybe not. There are places on Earth that haven't been fully explored, and being a sea creature, it could hide. It could be in the sea. We don't know. But this defies evolution. It's really the central point, but it's so impressive I had to read that, because this is just what the sort of thing that God uses to show people who's the creator. Okay, and I did have 40 there. And then Joshua 10:12-14, if it'll just pop up, it says, again, we're in the general theory, not topic not only of cosmology but evolution. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Ajalon." So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. I have to ask you what it was like to be on an earth that was spinning, that suddenly stopped and stayed stopped for 24 hours and then picked up again. What would you expect to happen on the surface, and why didn't anybody talk about it? Context is everything, and these contexts, while sometimes poetically expressed, never paint a picture of the universe that matches modern cosmology. Without getting into deep debate on those things, consider these questions. Should Genesis 1 bow to a theory, evolution, that doesn't even meet the requirement of being called scientific? People like Michael Heiser think it should. A lot of other people. If the Bible wanted to present the 6 days of creation as literal 24-hour days, as I mentioned before, how much more clearly would it have need to have been expressed than evening and morning, the nth day? Since the order of creation in Genesis 1 does not match evolutionary theory, should we dismiss the Bible or evolutionary theory? Can we ignore the sequence in Scripture? And as I mentioned before, what was the earth orbiting in the days before the sun was created? On the long day of Joshua that I just read, did the earth stop spinning, or did the sun and moon stop moving? Which would have less effect on things, because if you think about it, something's spinning and it suddenly stops, what happens to things not nailed down to the surface? They fly off in a straight line at a tangent. So everything on the surface of this ball should have gone off at a tangent, so sideways along the surface until it went into the sky. It didn't happen. Not even in anybody's poetry. What effects should have been reported in at least some parts of the world if that happened? None. We have reports of the flood in many cultures and religious writings. We have reports of a long night in some parts of the world. But nothing about this stop of spinning. Even in the most poetic passages, is Earth ever described as a spinning ball or that it moves through space? No. The Bible only describes the luminaries as the sun, moon, and stars, with some stars wandering, which is the meaning of planet, is the Greek word for wander. On what biblical basis do we believe that planets are not stars? Asking Christians who honor the Bible as the Word of God. Why is it never described in modern cosmological terms? So I'm going to go ahead and read my little conclusion here, and then we'll open it up. Should the Bible bow to an unstable patchwork of guesses and philosophy? Do we trust God or man? The Bible has passed every test of its claims about history, so why do we not trust its claims about nature, which God created? Instead, we try to force-fit Scripture into the latest philosophical framework or dismiss it as allegory or theological messaging. Who is really our God when we do that? Who is the most trustworthy source of truth and fact? Scripture must be read in context, so if the context is historical narrative, rather than moral lessons or wisdom literature, we must take it as factual. And if current claims of scientific fact don't match, we can only hope that someday those claims will catch up to reality. So again, the question is, in all of this, who's really the God of the Bible? Is it science? Does the Bible bow to that? Open it up to panel, hopefully. Anything to say? At all? I should have the audio working today, so somebody speak up.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Becky.
How are you, Paula?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Awesome. Any thoughts on all that?
I'm sorry, I arrived late, so I just caught the tail end of it.
Oh, no problem. We defined science, pseudoscience, cosmology, evolution were compared to science and found lacking, and then we read some Bible passages from Genesis 1 and Job 38 and 40. And ask these questions about who we should put as our highest authority. Should we put pseudoscience and metaphysics as cosmology is defined by Webster's dictionary, or should we put the Bible first? That's a question for every Christian.
Yeah, I'd always put the Bible first, and if it's not fitting, there's a problem. If something in our world is not adding up to what the scriptures say, there's a problem. That's what I believe.
Absolutely. There's an awful lot. Even young Earth creationists are, very against any sort of alternate cosmology because, in my opinion, having been in that community too, this is a problem that a charge that people, especially atheists, would use against young Earth creationists, even old Earth creationists would use to say, "Oh, you probably believe the Earth is flat too." And so they've had it drilled into them by that they want to stay as far from flat Earth or any kind of alternate cosmology as they can because that's how people would smear them as unscientific, and they want so much to please the world and have themselves be seen as scientific. But it's inconsistent if we're going to take the Bible as it tells it is, which is historical narrative in Genesis, we can't just take the evening and morning day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have to also take its descriptions of the earth and the sky. So, that's basically the question and what I wanted to look at in the Bible and have a challenge for Christians who believe one thing or the other. Especially I have issues with old Earth creationism because evolution itself is just not scientific. Why should we bow to it? It doesn't make any sense.
Is it rude to interrupt you on this? I'm very sorry. I was just curious of something. How does one get the ladies' night roll? I just want to check on that.
Yeah, you'd have to, if you go to the lobby or someplace like that and ping a mod or silver or gold, they should be able to help you with that, I think.
Okay, just checking because I was told that it had to be another woman that gives you it.
Oh, I don't even know when I'm a silver, so sorry about that.
Oh, okay. No worries, no worries. Continue.
Yeah, but thanks for coming. Anybody else? Yeah, no problem. Everybody's so quiet tonight.
I think that these young people that do notice these differences are too scared, as you said, to speak up because they want to be pleasing to the world and they don't want to be ridiculed either. It seems to be another thing. If you ask questions, you get ridiculed in this scenario, which seems to happen a lot. You just have to kind of accept the narrative and be quiet. Otherwise, you're going to cop it off people.
Right. It's peer pressure is not fun. I remember one time in college, I was in an ancient history class because it was required, and the professor sat up there and said, anybody, he put politics into it even in those days, this is back in the 80s, he said anybody who doesn't accept evolution or something about conservatives, he said, my sisters are conservative because they're uneducated.
Oh,
wow. I just thought,
Right.
I got nothing to learn from this guy.
Yeah, wow.
Okay, were you going
They
to say
do have
something?
that.
Okay.
Yeah, they do have that bias. That's definitely in Western societies. That science is absolute and it's the way we understand all truth, and don't understand its limitations, especially in regards to supernatural things. But it's not simply that it can't lead to supernatural conclusions; it's that they're off limits. I got a quote here
Right.
I can read.
Sure.
This is from Richard Lewontin from Hyperphysics. I posted it in there, but this was one of the books he wrote. A quote from it when he was critiquing one of Carl Sagan's books. So he says, "Our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense is the key to understanding the real struggle between science and the supernatural. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just so stories, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by an a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations. No matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. So you could see that they have a presupposed bias based on a philosophy that God can't be an answer for any of these things, and therefore it must be materialism.
Right. Yeah, I remember that quote from, thanks for that. It's standard fare. And we've all read news stories about people who were denied entrance into a college or discipline because they doubted Darwin. Not that, even that they were believing in God, but that they just questioned the theory. They were not allowed in because they were automatically written off as unscientific and unworthy of a science education. So yeah, straight up bias.
And another worthy point of note is, we are on a Flat Earth server, and we get a lot of people coming in, talk about the Flat Earth Society. And it is considered by many to be a counter-op where it presents the Flat Earth concept in a stupid way to get people turned off from it. But it actually holds a secret, which is that this idea that quote-unquote gravity is the Earth rising at 9.8 meters per second, and they attribute this to a flat Earth idea. But in actuality, it's the underpinning for the creation of the relativity theory by Einstein. That's the foundation of it at the beginning. So they're actually hiding the fact that relativity is nonsense, not the fact that a flat Earth is nonsense.
Right. Yeah, like I said, it's defined as metaphysical. And that's what modern physics pretty much is. There's been channels that did really good videos on explaining exactly how religious modern physics is, theoretical physics, because its ideas are very much more close to like Hinduism and the teachings in the Vedas and things like that than they ever are to anything empirical. Because I forget where I saw a chart today where something like 3/4 of the mass of the universe is pretty much imaginary. It's dark matter or dark energy. I forget what the exact percentage was, but when 3/4 of what you say about the natural world is undetectable, and then you think that you're not religious or that you're better off than quote unquote religious people, you have a serious cognitus problem, because this is so like I said, obvious that they're just being hypocritical about it. They're using a double standard, or they're in denial, however you want to put it, because they're saying religious ideas that have been around for thousands of years and calling it science now. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, let's keep in mind too that the internal world, the metaphysical internal subjective experience, is tangibly real to the experiencer that cannot be denied. You can't think in your mind, I'm not thinking, and be not thinking. And the external world is less tangible than that, yet they want to put all the emphasis on the quote-unquote tangible world, which is only tangible through the mind anyway.
Right. They think they're emptying their mind, but they're not. I mean, they think that. Like you said, it's inescapable. Even the Zen Buddhist saying nothing is knowable is a self-contradictory term, because how do you know that nothing is knowable? You have to think about it. They embrace absurdity. That's all that'll do is make you insane. It won't make you enlightened. It won't make you of any practical use on the earth. Just like, what was that fictional story, Lost Horizon, or no, maybe that was it. These people who lived in Shangri-La, they lived on this high hill and the people in the village below would support them. It's like, what good were they doing for the village? None whatsoever. And yet they were revered and bowed to, and it doesn't make any sense, but we do the same thing with priests in white lab coats today. You know? We do the same thing, and we treat them as the Gnostics would, where they have a knowledge that we can't attain without their guidance and can't understand these things, and we just have to accept contradictions like you just read off there where they're by their own admission, because they are the enlightened ones and they know and we don't, and we just have to trust them, you know. I don't see the difference between that and Gnosticism or any of the quote-unquote New Age kind of religions. So, long story short, anybody who values the Bible and respects it as God's word really doesn't have much of a choice. The earth is young and it's not moving and it's stationary, regardless of the actual shape, you know. All we know is we can see way farther than we should. There was a video that was put out by Taboo Conspiracy. It was a mirror of a compilation of a bunch of other things. I don't have the link in front of me right now, but really did a great job of showing exactly how actual observation, which does meet the scientific method criteria, shows that we're not on a ball. It's indisputable. So the Bible doesn't have a problem with a stationary Earth. It doesn't have a problem with a young Earth. You know, we have to decide who our God is. So Crystal is talking to herself in the live chat. Sorry about that. Now there's other people there. But any other comments about any of that? I mean, it's kind of a big deal. I don't think I forgot to read any of the parts of Scripture there I had on my notes, but any other thoughts? I mean, we're still under our hour. I could try to find that video if you want.
I don't really have anything to add productive to the conversation. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Anyways, I really enjoyed that. That was really awesome. I'm glad that I was able to make it this week. So that was really interesting. I enjoyed that.
Thank you. Glad you could come. Acid Rain said he couldn't be here for he had something else he had to do, so but he'd usually be here. If you want,
I will say there is.
Go ahead.
There is a natural bias to affirm our own positions that we generally hold philosophically about the world by interpreting the text to fit our worldview, which a lot of people do. Like they'll use the circle of the earth to be like, see, it's a sphere, which a circle is not a sphere. And you know, people do that with all parts of Scripture. Like there's so much interpretive and in some cases straight up denial of what the actual text means in the historical cultural context. And
right.
You know, they'll just say, I put this before the word. I put, you know, science says this, the Bible seems to say this, so science definitely right. And therefore I'm going to interpret the Bible in light of that rather than the other way around. And most people don't go
right.
any further because it's been so ingrained in them that science is a legitimate enterprise, which it is when it's done properly.
Right.
But when it's attributed to things that aren't science and they vicariously want to take that merit for themselves, then people look at it and they say, well, this claim was scientifically verified. And we will, well, it must be true then. Lo and behold, it was never scientifically verified.
Right. And people, like I said, you know, they don't know what scientifically verified even means because they don't know the scientific method. So that's why I thought it was important to go over that first because, like I said, I got a definition even from was it Webster's dictionary that it's metaphysics and a doctrine and believes in things like space-time, which is immaterial and therefore, according especially to the quote that you read, not science. By their own admission, they're embracing what they forbid, you know, anybody else to do. They're basically just replacing one religion with another. And yes, by the way, in the chat there, I have been, Crystal sent me those videos on the Chosen series. I've been trying to watch that and catch up. It is really good. It's very well produced. It's a series on the Gospels, basically. I think it's really well done.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's so entertaining too. I think even atheists could watch it and thoroughly enjoy the show.
Yeah, it's pretty authentic without having to do like the Passion of the Christ did, where they spoke in Aramaic and you had to read subtitles the whole time.
Yeah.
That was kind of tedious in other ways too. But I like how they're portraying the characters and how you could tell from the very beginning who the characters were. Like Mary Magdalene was pretty obvious. You knew later that Jesus was going to drive out the demons. And but I shouldn't say too much. I don't want to spoil for people who haven't seen it yet. But really good if you see it. It's available for free on YouTube, so check it out. Let's see. I could get that link as well. Let me get the channel link and post that also in YouTube. So there you go. But yeah, anything else about the Bible and science? And then we can talk about whatever. Because what I want to do is I want to round out the public live streaming, and then we'll just have our usual off-screen after show, I guess you could call it. Because if there's no more discussion, I will go ahead and round that out. Anybody? Let's see. Royal Apple said, pray for her sister. She has entities that keep her in a vegetative. Everybody pray for Royal Apple's sister for being freed from entities. I'm going to stop sharing my screen on Discord. All right, well, I'm going to mute things and do my outro, and we'll see everybody else. Oh yeah, the debate on Friday. Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on my channel, as far as I know, because I don't think there's time to make any other arrangements. So I will be participating in a debate and also trying to run the live stream at the same time. So hoping everything works and everybody's healthy and on their game. It's going to be on the other person I'm debating is just a one-on-one on some ideas about who Jesus is. I forget the exact title. Do you remember, AI, how you worded the title of that?
The nature and person of the biblical Messiah. Be there or be square. Friday.
Excellent announcement. Thank you. So yeah, that Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern, and it will run several hours because the basic format is introductory remarks for a few minutes each, then 30 minutes each presentation, and then we get into some rebuttal stage and then a question and answer stage. And if anyone has an idea of how you can take what I'm streaming to my channel and also stream it somewhere else, gotta hurry and let me know. But I don't want to be dealing with it because I got enough on my plate already. So that's Friday, and of course next Sunday is the usual 2 p.m. Eastern Sunday Bible lessons. So we'll see you there, and thanks for coming, everybody. And don't forget that debate. So I'm going to mute and do the sign out here.
Are we still on the internet, on the YouTube, or are we